We are here with real estate and the economy this week with me, Jared Uraine, and the Five Diamond Group at Vice Realty, and the blind economist,
There you go.
Miguel Francis. Did I get that right?
Well, yeah, the blind economist Mike Francis. I'm trying to simplify it for people. What, Miguel Francis?
Miguel.
Hey, you.
Hey, you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That works.
How does that
yeah.
work in the search terms there,
Yeah,
Mike?
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't tried that yet. Yeah, yeah.
Wave him down.
Yeah.
He'll catch your eye. So thank you so much for joining in on real estate and the economy this week here with Five Diamond Group. Mike, it's nice to see you again, man.
Thanks. How'd you do in history in high school?
Terribly.
Well,
But
then-
you know what? As an adult, I read a lot of it. So
Oh, cool. So, who was the only president to serve as president and never be elected to the office?
never be elected.
He was never elected.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fill me in.
Well, you can't pick a vice president because the vice president was on the ticket, right?
Okay.
So like Lyndon B. Johnson, he was on the ticket, when he ran with JFK. But anyway, Henry Ford,
Okay.
right? Because Henry Ford was appointed to be vice president by Richard Milhouse Nixon, right? So who opened up China? I kind of gave it away.
Well,
but
I know that.
Okay.
That was Nixon.
very good. And who laid the groundwork for opening up China? His Secretary of State. There's your clue.
Yeah. Kissinger.
That's right, Henry Kissinger, who, by the way, is still alive.
Yeah.
So I bring up Henry Kissinger because today we're going to talk about China, and I'll just tell you one of my favorite Kissinger quotes. No one will ever win the battle of the sexes because there's too much fraternizing with the enemy. Well, if you knew Henry Kissinger, that's real funny.
Yeah. Well, I just got back from Japan, man. So
Okay,
it's like
okay.
kind of like a mixed bag there.
Okay, yeah.
So we're just over 50 years since they opened up China to be able to do some more, to be able to open up to Western trade with them.
Right.
More like 60 years, right? Something like that.
Well, their economy didn't start to take off until 1970. Well, it started its revolution in 1979, and it started to take off,
Yeah.
in the mid to late 80s. Yeah. So.
Right. And so now we're 40 years into their China being a contributor to the world economy,
Right.
and it's been a hot topic of news, especially with Blinken doing his visit this week, and it seems like there's a pivot there from a political standpoint on Taiwan, which is to kind of better the relationship with China,
Right.
So how is all of this contributing to China's economy?
Well, the Chinese economy, right now, it's the small to micro businesses. They can be compared, I haven't decided if they're going to be the heart of the economy or the arteries, but either way, they're critical, and unfortunately, they're struggling. The small and micro businesses in the Chinese economy can't seem to find their footing after what many in China called COVID control. I was actually speaking to an individual in China about Q4 of last year, and he was complaining incredibly about how COVID-19 was being managed in China. And I didn't really understand the full nuance of it until, now that I see the economic reports coming out of China, I see what he was upset about, because he was looking financially towards his future, and it's a complicated mess over there right now.
Well, considering zero tolerance for COVID, I mean, how
Right.
beneficial can that be for their overall economy in the end, right?
Right, yeah. Now, they may have been trying to save lives and everything, which is, admirable, but unfortunately, the world's a complicated place. Trying to save lives and run an economy sometimes don't harmonize together. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so with the small business arena being really hindered in that environment, it's looking like they will. Well, the forecast for them is not good so far.
Well, what's going on? Okay, their small business and microeconomy actually makes up an incredibly large portion of their workforce, 233 million people. And what's happening right now is those sectors are contracting. Both small business and the PMI index for China, the Producers Manufacturing Index, are contracting. PMI is coming in at 48. Now, par, meaning to break even, would be 50. So anything below 50 means they're shrinking. And the small business index is coming in at about just a little over 47. So what that means is that they're not, in terms of the small business, they're not, 40% of all small businesses are producing below capacity. And the Producers Manufacturing Index, coming in at 48 means they're either not hiring employees who have left or they're shedding employees. So again, they're contracting. And that's a big deal to the Chinese economy because consumer spending, which is about 34% of the Chinese economy, and manufacturing, those are big pieces to that economy. Those are, like I said, I couldn't decide. Maybe one's the arteries and the other's the heart, right?
Yeah, and so when we compare that to, let's say, the American economy using the capitalist structure, they aren't a kind of an apple to apple equivalent. They've got a different structure over there.
Right.
The government is offering assistance to many of these businesses, but it's still insufficient for them not just to be able to produce, but produce at par. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And part of it has to do with, I guess, what we would call consumer sentiment, or in their case, it would be the sentiment of the business owners and industry, the manufacturing. They do not want to take on any more debt. And I don't blame them. They have nine, the small business and the small industrial sectors, they have 9 trillion with a T dollars in debt. And so the government's trying to make affordable lending available to them. As a matter of fact, the Chinese government recently lowered their central bank rate, from 2.0 to 1.9.
Different direction.
Yeah, the different direction from the rest of the planet,
Right.
actually.
In order to stimulate encouragement.
Exactly. And it looks like they're going to do what we call quantitative easing. They're actually going to be putting billions of dollars
Back
into the economy.
Okay. So they're doing what the U.S. economy did in 2008, 9, 10.
Right.
Yeah.
And well, let me just comment before. The problem with that for China is that devalues their currency.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in this time where most of the world banks are raising their rate in order to tackle inflation.
Canada just last week bumped the rate. The European Union last week, the EU bumped their rate. The UK is going to bump their rate. They almost have to. The United States skipped last week, but Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman, he said, as we said on this episode last week, that they're going to bump the rate twice more. However, I'd like to point out, if you were listening to the Five Diamond Group last week, you heard it here 24 hours before the Fed chairman said it. And so the whole planet is increasing their central bank rate, but China's not in the same economic condition as the rest of the planet. They're not facing incredibly high inflation like much of the planet. As a matter of fact, they have high unemployment among their youth. 16 to 24 is just a little over 20%. So they need to stimulate their economy. But the problem is, the more they stimulate the economy, the more they devalue their own currency.
So one of the means that they were able to stimulate or keep their economy running, or I should say one of the pillars of their economy, is real estate, or the purchase of real estate, specifically as an investment. Many people have purchased multiple homes as an investment, but it's coming to light that a lot of those properties, they own more properties than there are population in that country. They were creating ghost cities, and that's starting to create some headwind for them in that.
Well, that's a serious problem. As a matter of fact, I spoke with a person in the technology sector, Edmund, in Singapore, and he gave me some information about that. But what's going on with the real estate market, as you said, it's overdeveloped. There's more homes than there are families. And so one of the difficulties is As a matter of fact, in 2022, the real estate market was the slowest it's been in 6 years, right? And so, if there's an individual in China who owns a furniture store, and his sales have dropped through the floor because if nobody's
No pun
purchasing,
intended.
right, oh, yeah, I get it. Yeah, hadn't thought of it, but yeah, his sales are dropping through the floor because if people aren't purchasing new homes, then he can't sell furniture.
Right.
Right. And so because he can't sell furniture, he's not hiring. As a matter of fact, he's laying people off, and that means people aren't manufacturing furniture. It's become this, circle of death sort of thing. It's a spiral that feeds on itself. Unfortunately, it's a pretty complicated thing for China right now.
So Warren Buffett just sold off all of their interest, Berkshire Hathaway's interest in Taiwan Semiconductors. This was a month ago or so.
Right.
And that's kind of an indicator as to their perspective as to the security of China. And now, this past weekend, the Secretary of State talked about the U.S. position on Taiwan, essentially saying Taiwan independence is it's not in their interest, right? So something along those lines. How does that affect us here today?
Well, from an economic point of view, any companies that are doing business in Taiwan, which, by the way, is the number one producer of semiconductors in the world.
Has been the sole producer for many years, but
yes. And so that being the case, some companies or some individuals like Warren Buffett, they want to de-risk because they don't know what the future of Taiwan geopolitically may be. And so from an economic point of view, when there's tensions between governments, that hinders larger corporations from taking advantage of what was doing real well for a while, and that's globalization. Globalization's starting to fragment now from a financial point of view because of all the competing entities. For instance, the BRIC nations, that Brazil, Russia,
Right.
India, China, and South America, they set up two major banks in China to try and develop a competitive currency against the United States dollar. Those banks are actually now becoming ghost towns because of the war in Europe. And the largest of those two banks that were set up in China needs to be bailed out with, funny enough, the U.S. dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ironic.
Yeah.
The question for Taiwan, though, is because they were the sole producer of semiconductors. There are now
Right.
factories that are being developed in Phoenix, outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and other places in order to help spread that portion out. But the reason why it is a question mark is because that can impact technology, period, because that semiconductor is the heart, the core of tools, products.
Well, what's funny is smart chips are used in your toaster.
Yeah.
They're used in your hair dryer. They're used in your electric toothbrush.
Right.
And it is good that they're developing those manufacturing plants in other spots around the globe. They're trying to onshore or nearshore that supply chain for semiconductors. However, that process is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's
Right.
going to take 5 years to be online, and possibly longer than that to offset what's coming from Taiwan. So it's good that that's happening. It would have been nice had they started that 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to be pessimistic, but
I mean,
Yeah.
hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah.
But as far as the economy, the Chinese economy at this point, the reason for the interest, why it affects us here locally, what would be the connection?
Well, the Chinese economy is the second largest economy in the world. And the Chinese economy already has a real estate bubble going on. It's the single largest asset class on the planet. If the Chinese economy goes into a serious recession, that's going to affect global GDP. United States exports will decrease. Imports will be more expensive. It'll have an inflationary impact to the United States. We no longer live on an island by ourselves. For the last 100 years or so, the world has been one one place. And when something happens across the planet, it has a rippling effect to all of us. So for us, if China struggles, trying to refill those supply chains and those manufacturing sources, et cetera, they're going to have to reach out to other countries, near shore or onshore those things. And no matter how you cut it, it's going to have an upward pressure on inflation. And we're already fighting inflation in this country. That's not working in our favor.
Yeah. Well, the strength of the U.S. economy is really evident in our low unemployment rate, as well as the strength or how persistent inflation has been. People have adjusted to the cost of living with current pricing. Go ahead.
Which isn't good.
Right.
If they're adjusting to inflation,
Right.
that's only going to sustain inflation. Yeah,
Yep.
that's not good. Yeah. That's a bad thing.
And so the Fed trying to target the 2% inflation rate it ends up being a good thing in the long run for the United States economy. In my observation, just hitting the streets this weekend, coming home, shopping, I feel like there has been some softening in prices at the grocery store and at the gas station. Personal perspective, I don't know how it actually relates to the actual economy, though.
There has been.
Yeah.
You are correct. As a matter of fact, the cost of fuel is going to go further down. But we have to remember that food and energy are not part of the core inflation number that the Fed looks at.
Right.
And the core inflation number right now is 5.3%.
Yeah.
So that's far away from their 2% target, And the reason they don't use fuel and energy is because those numbers are volatile. They, food and energy could be good today and bad tomorrow.
Right.
And so we need something more consistent for the Fed to make policy on, so those numbers are thrown out. However, that's headline inflation, and that is what everybody looks at. But we need to be focused on core inflation because that's what central banks around the globe base their policy on. And it's core inflation, and it's core inflation. That means you look at core inflation and remove housing. Core inflation is high as well, And so all of those things need to continue to come down, because if you sustain inflation even over 4%, it's bad for the economy long term. It's like somebody who wants to work all day and doesn't get enough sleep. In the long run, that's not going to work out. That's
like me
bad
right now. I'm feeling jet lag.
Well, that's for somebody who
that's self-imposed.
Yeah,
it's not.
exactly.
It's not sustainable.
Going to Disneyland in Tokyo with friends and family, which, by the way, didn't include me. Thank you very much. I don't know how I didn't get my invitation. You didn't even bring me back. Oh, did you bring my magnet?
Yeah, sure I did. Yeah.
Yeah, sure I did. Does anybody else feel not confident about that statement? Yeah, sure I did.
I got some snacks for you, man.
Oh, good, great. Yeah, off the airplane. Thanks. Yeah.
No. Yeah, dried squid from 7-Eleven. You like squid, right?
Yeah. You know what? You better buy a magnet on Amazon so I could tell my wife that you bought her something back. But anyway, that's a self-imposed thing on you. But yeah, sustaining inflation for too long is, like I said, it's like working every day and not getting enough sleep. Eventually, it doesn't work. It'll wear the economy out.
Right.
Pretty soon, the economy will just pass out, face down.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying those points, Mike. Do we have anything else to mention before we wrap it up?
Well, yes. UK. This is for another day, but keep an eye on the UK real estate sector. They are the United Kingdom over the last ever since the Great Recession has gotten into the practice of doing 3 and 5 year adjustable rate mortgages. So right now, 50% of the UK real estate sector is looking at troubles because of the increased interest rates. I do want to say one last thing about interest rates. We are in a normal interest rate environment.
Yes, sir.
Nobody seems to understand that 2 and 3% was never normal. When you look at historically, when real estate markets thrived, it was always 6 and 7%.
Yeah.
So we're in a normal environment. We just have to, we have to wing ourselves off of those lower rates. Taper, I guess, and so we have to get used to the normal rate. go to The Blind Economist. I do that once a week on Thursdays.
Yep.
And Michael Anthony Francis on LinkedIn, The Blind Economist.
Yeah, so let's get all those remarks in. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much for tuning in to the real estate and economy this week. You can catch Mike on his own YouTube channel at The Blind Economist. On YouTube, he does publish an episode online once a week. There, he also has a daily newsletter. Catch him on LinkedIn.
Correct.
Miguel A. Francis. You can catch us here at the 5 Diamond Group at 5 Diamond Group on any one of the social outlets. And if you like this content, this information, please feel free to share it. And if you'd like more reminders, we do publish this every week, 2 p.m., Tuesdays. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate your time and your insights. Always the local expert.
So be ready for historical questions next week.
Yeah. Give me I'll take the categories.
Yeah.
We're turning this into Jeopardy now. Huh?
Yeah.
Is that what
Presidents for 500.
Yeah. I'm only recently gotten into all that political history, so yeah, still learning it. Hey, man, thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Me too.
All right.